to welcome all of you to our live call tonight as we chart a path forward for the Democratic Party and working class politics. Help us get things rolling by introducing yourself in the chat. Tell us your name, where you're from, and why you're tuning in tonight. We're going to be digging into some election analysis this evening with the nation's John Nichols and the need to reform the Democratic Party with our revolution leaders Larry Cohen and Jane Kleeb. We will even look at a couple highlights from Election Day, including down ballot victories and some progressive ballot measures. But now more than ever, it's very clear that progressive economic policies must take the lead in the party. So real quick, let me read some names as they're popping into the Zoom room here. We've got Gina Marsh in Cincinnati, Ohio, Marissa from Florida, Allison in Missouri, and Beth Bennett in Oakland, New Jersey. It's really starting to fly now. David is in Vermont. Noel is in San Jose. Neil Perlman from Chicago. Alexandra in California. As you can see, we've got folks tuning in from all across the country, rural areas, urban areas, coast to coast. And I want to thank all of our grassroots supporters out there who make everything we do here at Our Revolution possible. It was because of your donations that we were able to mount a massive GOTV effort of more than 5 million voter contacts into the swing states. We were able to get some wins at the local level, at the state level. We elected a progressive member of Congress and some really important ballot measures as well that will help make our communities more resilient in these Trump years to come. If you're not already a recurring monthly member of Our Revolution, now is a really important time to plug in with this movement. I want to invite all of you to sign up for as little as $5-10 a month and really help fuel the fight to come. That link is going to be dropped in the chat right now. And once again, if you're just tuning in, I'm Amanda Nichols, and I'm the communications director here at Our Revolution, and we're just about to kick off our call. So keep boosting the chat, keep telling us your name and where you're from, how you're feeling, and why you're tuning in. Tonight, we're going to delve into the 2024 election. We've got John Nichols of The Nation here for some important election analysis. And we're going to be talking about how to reform and transform the Democratic Party with Our Revolution board chair, Larry Cohen, and board member, Jane Kleeb. So Jane serves as the Nebraska party chair, and Larry is a longtime member of the DNC who led the Unity Reform Commission after Bernie's 2016 run. You'll remember that's when we first started the fight to get superdelegates off the first ballot. Just this past summer, that became permanent. And Larry was also president of the CWA Union, so he knows a thing or two about working class politics, and I'm excited to hear from him. But before we get started, I want to share a couple links with you really quick. The first one is a survey that I hope you will take tonight. We really want you to weigh in on our efforts and strategy to transform the party. This is a time for the grassroots to make ourselves heard so that we can make this a more democratic party that can defeat Republicans and deliver for working people. That is going in the chat right now. And secondly, if you're serious about resisting Trump, we want you on our team. So join our rapid response team so that we're ready to mobilize at the drop of a hat. For starters, we're going to be jumping into action to pressure the Senate to reject some of Trump's worst cabinet picks. That link is also going in the chat right now. I've got just about 30 seconds to read a few more names. We've got Raven Long in Charlottesville, Virginia. We have Latanya. Hey, Latanya. She's one of our great phone bankers who really did a lot of work heading into the election. And all the work that you guys did, all the help that you gave us was really important. It made a difference. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our host for the evening. It's 8:30 on the dot. We've got Our Revolution's executive director, Joseph Gevargiz. Joseph.
Thank you, Amanda Nichols. Brothers and sisters, good evening. My name is Joseph Gevargiz. I'm the executive director of Our Revolution. I want to welcome each and every one of you to our live Organized to Win call. Tonight, we're going to be debriefing the Democrats' disastrous election results, and we're going to be discussing how we forge a new path forward for a party that has clearly lost its way. We're going to start this evening by diving into an analysis about the election with John Nichols from The Nation. And then we'll dig into how we reform and transform the Democratic Party with our revolution leaders, Larry Cohen and Jane Kleeb. Jane serves as the Nebraska Democratic Party chair, and Larry is a longtime member of the Democratic National Committee, and he led the Unity Reform Commission after Bernie's 2016 presidential run. But before I bring up our guests, I want to thank all of our grassroots volunteers and our donors who powered our massive swing state GOTV operation. The number one rule of politics is to turn out your base. And that's what our revolution did. We focused on getting progressive to the polls. These are Bernie voters, Warren voters. We focused on getting them out to vote in the 7 critical swing states. And because of your support, our organizers were able to make more than 5 million voter contacts. We reached out by phone, by text, by email, and we were on the doors. And let me tell you something, our work did make a difference. When we started, 1 in 5 progressive voters told us that they were sitting this election out or not voting for Harris. But by the final weeks of the campaign, we were able to cut that number in half. But still, going into election, if 1 in 10 progressives are telling you they ain't going to vote, even after you do your best organizing conversation, it means that the Democratic campaign has a much, much bigger strategic problem. And brothers and sisters, I want to let you know that we at Our Revolution did everything we could to sound the alarm with the campaign and through the news media. We alerted, right? We sounded the alarm about an enthusiasm deficit that we were hearing from voters. We talked to the New York Times, we talked to the Associated Press, we talked to NPR, and we warned Democrats that they needed to do a course correction. What we said is trotting out the Cheneys and the Clintons and the Obamas, it was alienating to voters, to base voters who see globalist free traders and warmongers as public enemy number one. That is not who we needed to have out on the campaign. But it seems to me that the establishment forgot the lessons from 2016 and 2020, which showed that the center of energy in the Democratic Party is with the economic populist wing. At the end of the day, all that the Democratic nominee needed to do was to show that she was going to be the strongest candidate who would take on the rich and the powerful in order to improve the standard of living for America's workers. That is the test that Kamala Harris and the Democrats failed. After the election, Bernie issued a powerful statement, and I quote, "It should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party which has abandoned the working class would find that the working class has now abandoned them. First, it was the white working class. Now it's Black and Latino workers as well. While the Democratic Party leadership defends the status quo, the American people are angry and they want change. And you know what? They're right." End quote. Bernie is saying what our grassroots members have been thinking. In our post-election survey of more than 12,000 progressives, our members faulted the party for neglecting the working class and for focusing on chasing Cheney Republicans. 91%, 91% of our members surveyed said that they believe that the Democratic Party has long neglected the multiracial working class and the issues that matter to them. And 76% said that the Democratic Party has lost its way. These are damning numbers because our membership base are the activists and leaders within the progressive wing of the Democratic Party and within the Democratic Party itself. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We need to understand, brothers and sisters, how we got here so that we never end up here again. The good news is that we can learn lessons from some of our down ballot victories. And yes, there is some good news. Our movement won ballot measures to expand union rights in Massachusetts and Colorado. We won minimum wage hikes and paid sick leave in multiple jurisdictions. This is evidence that voters want a working class agenda. And not only that, we did elect progressives. We are sending Latifah Simon to Congress to represent us in California. We continue to build our progressive power in places like St. Louis and Chicago. And as our revolution looks to 2025, organizing to win local election is going to be critical to our work to resist Trump and to make sure our communities are resilient going forward. At the end of the day, we've got to build power at the local level, just like the Republicans have done for decades. But that being said, in the next few months, Jamie Harrison is going to step down as the chair of the Democratic National Committee. And there's going to be a battle for the direction, the soul of where the party will head. And it's up to us to have a voice in that process and actually to seize the reins. We can't allow the party to keep going rightwards and keep trying to appease the donor class, keep trying to appease the elites. We've seen the consequences of that, and we've had enough. Right now, I want to again emphasize what Amanda said at the top of the call. We are running a survey about transforming the party. I urge everyone here tonight to click on the link and take the survey when you have a few moments. We want to understand and report out to Democratic Party leadership what the priorities of grassroots leaders are as we reimagine where this party goes. We are going to email this out to everyone who's part of our revolution, but if you want to click on the link and start filling it out, that would be awesome. And with that, let's get started. I want to bring up our first guest, John Nichols, who covers the political desk at The Nation. John was with us on one of our last get out the vote calls before the election. And we discussed a piece that he wrote. And he raised the question in the title, can Kamala Harris take it all? And it was a question mark. The answer is clearly no. Something happened between the start of the Harris race, where there was an incredible amount of enthusiasm that she was going to be the standard bearer, and then the end of the race. And so, John, tell us what happened. What did you see?
Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me on.
Hey, brother.
It's a great honor to be with everybody. And I want to especially do a shout out to Larry Cohen, who has been on the right side of history for as long as just about anybody I know, and has fought the real battles with the DNC on a host of issues. And you're so lucky to have him both with your organization, but also on tonight, because the wisdom that he'll bring to this is very important. I'll also tell you that Jane Cleve is somebody that I was out with in Nebraska in reporting on the story you mentioned right at the start of the campaign. And the work that she does, her deep connection to voters across Nebraska has been, it's really inspirational to see. And you couldn't have a better person on to talk to you about some of the issues we'll be discussing. And also, it's an honor to be with Our Revolution, a group that actually understands what the struggle is about. So let me talk a little bit about what you laid out well there at the start. The article I wrote, which you referenced, was written after doing something that most people in media don't do, and it's a word that's kind of been lost to media. It's called reporting. And I went out and drove across a lot of the Midwest. I went all the way out to Nebraska, out through Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, and I talked to people right after that transition from Biden, who had, really, I mean, his poll numbers had just collapsed. People were genuinely depressed. Then Harris came in. And in those weeks after she came in, I went out across and spent a lot of time in cafes and union halls and church basements and wherever people were. And I got to tell you, the energy was amazing. We should not neglect that there was a tremendous number of activists who were very excited by this possibility that something had opened up, that they were not going to be struggling to try and make the argument for Biden at a point when he had a very tough debate performance and some things like that. And Harris seemed to hit the ground running very fast. And it opened up the question, could the Democratic Party actually, in a very short amount of time, they had about 107 days, begin to seriously compete, not just in the 7 battleground states, but to push the margin beyond it, to push the margin to the place where you could try to win an actual victory, right? Not on the margins, but go out there and win the votes you needed to have the presidency, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, because that's what you need. I mean, you don't compete simply to, kind of straggle across the line. You compete to govern, right? To be able to actually do things. And so that was what I was exploring. There were certainly, even then, some warning signs and concerns, but there was also an enthusiasm that was real. And what I will tell you is that in the aftermath of the Democratic National Convention, you began to see a lot of that energy dwindle, right? And part of the problem is, and I come from Wisconsin, a battleground state, so I say this with an element of discomfort, but when a campaign is so focused on a handful of battleground states, that is damaging to the enthusiasm level nationally. It's something that we've got to think about and wrestle with, because it is a problematic reality. But it is the reality that we ended up with. And so as the focus became more and more intense on the battleground states, I think people in a lot of other places, it became more challenging for them politically. And the campaign, frankly, didn't help. Here's where the real problem, and I see 3 areas of concern here with what the campaign did. And I say to somebody who's interviewed the vice president, who actually has very warm feelings for her in a lot of ways, right? Don't agree with her on everything, but I think she's actually, she had many strengths, et cetera. But I think there were 3 things that happened that are really critical. And I want to point out, I wrote about all 3 of these things before the election, because I think that's an important thing to put in the mix, because too often after the election, you recognize, oh, wow, that should have been done. All of these are things I wrote about before the election. First thing was, if you are saying that you're here to replace a sitting president, right? This president has stood down, and though you're part of their administration, you are now the candidate for president. And there has to be some element of change, right? It isn't just continuity. There has to be some signal that you're doing a change. The first place to do that was on Gaza. And the Harris campaign and the Democratic Party should have gotten a much better stance, a much better signal, at least, on Gaza. And what that should have been is to say, look, the president has tried. You can give him his compliments or whatever you want. But at the end of the day, what you have to say is, if I'm elected president of the United States, we're going to go a lot tougher to end this thing. And you have to acknowledge the reality of an arms embargo, to talk about that, to talk about, all of the issues that are related to this. And also, frankly, it should have started at the convention by putting a Palestinian American on the stage. They didn't do that. And they spent an immense amount of time during the campaign trying to avoid the issue, trying to build around it rather than address it. It was a very problematic situation, and one that they should have seen coming, because in 1968, I'm not going to go through all the history, but Hubert Humphrey went through the exact same thing. He needed to make a bigger break on Vietnam. He didn't do it till very late in the campaign, and he never really got the boost that he could have gotten. Humphrey narrowly lost the presidency in 68. If he had won, almost everything in America would be different. So, first and foremost, there was a lesson there. They should have seen it. They didn't. That was problematic. Second, instead of reaching out to progressives and having a real campaign that was aggressively aiming at building the base of progressive voters, the work that you folks did, but frankly, you needed more support from the party on this effort, they decided on a strategy of reaching out to Republicans. And it was madness. Not because you don't want to build a broad coalition. That's fine to build a broad coalition. But here's the thing to understand. Donald Trump's been around for a decade. There have been never Trump Republicans for a decade. That messaging was delivered long ago. The Republicans that were going to split from Trump split. They weren't with him. And so a strategy based on taking Liz Cheney around the country, right, and saying to people in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, 2 events in Wisconsin with Liz Cheney, major events, whole day, portions of days devoted to this, was madness. It was a strategy that was never going to move votes. And in fact, as Joe, you suggested, it actually may have moved some people away. Very, very foolish strategy. And I've written about it. I mean, you just see the evidence of the problem in Ripon, Wisconsin, where they actually held an event with Cheney, founding place of the Republican Party, big event, high profile, live on the cable channels, the whole bit. Trump's vote went up. They didn't move any Republicans away from there. And I know some people say, well, it wasn't, Wisconsin was closer than the other battleground states. It's true, it was, but it wasn't because of running around with Liz Cheney. It was because people were working really hard in working class areas. So that's the first one, is they need to get Gaza right. They need to get a break there. Second one, they spent immense amounts of time. They wasted day after day running around with Liz Cheney and other Republicans on a fool's mission. Third thing, look, a few weeks out from the election, it became very clear that there was a problem in the outreach to working class voters. The polls just didn't open up, right? They didn't widen out in the way that they needed to widen out. And so you could see it in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And so Sean Fain, the head of the UAW, actually started talking a lot about trade deals and about Trump's approach to trade and how it had actually harmed American workers. Now, trade policy is something that workers in the battleground states of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and I would argue North Carolina, among others, actually understand, because unions like, Larry Cohen's CWA, they went out and actually taught people about trade policy. And so people understood it, right? So here you had this great opening, and all you needed to do was go out and really dig into that issue. And the place was on, Trump's reform of NAFTA. It should have been referred to always as Trump's NAFTA, because people understand NAFTA. And it should have been done, aggressively, with an argument on behalf of Harris that she was one of, I believe, 10 senators, along with Bernie Sanders, who voted against Trump's NAFTA. She actually got the vote right. So she had a perfect opening to talk about this issue. And yet it was barely brought into the campaign, barely referenced. It wasn't in the TV ads. It wasn't, it wasn't a focus of, full days of campaigning. And I'll close off with this simple message. If Kamala Harris had taken those days that she spent with Liz Cheney and had instead gone to visit union halls in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin with Sean Fain or Bernie Sanders, and if Bernie Sanders had been sent out on a really extensive college campus tour in these same states, I think you would have had a very different result. Not the whole result that I would have liked to have seen, which is a transformational one where you open up the politics, what I wrote about in that initial article. But I think it was very much within the realm of possibility that Kamala Harris could have won that election, and the Democrats could have won the additional House seats they needed to at least control the House. Senate is tougher, I'll acknowledge that. But the fact of the matter is this could have been different. And I think, unfortunately, we have to talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, we fail to recognize the changes that need to be made. And so I'll leave it at that, except to say this simple core message. They needed to get it right on Gaza. They needed to focus on the working class, not on the Liz Cheneys. And they needed to take that working class message out, especially in the final stages of the campaign. If they had done it aggressively and put the resources behind it, I think they had a real chance to win. And the challenges that we face as a country going forward are challenges that might have been avoided. At this point, I'm not a big, blame layer. That isn't my point. My point here is to say that as we talk about a campaign to choose the new leaders of the Democratic Party and where the Democratic Party is going, again, I don't want some, point finger blame there, point finger blame there. That's not it. I point these things out because when you choose your next leader, whoever it is, you want somebody who understands this stuff. And if they don't understand it, you should look elsewhere.
Amen. John Nichols, totally agree with you. I would also say that, I think you hit on the right points in terms of critiquing the Democratic campaign. And the other thing that I was struck with is that Trump had a story.
Yes.
He had a narrative, right? You are hurting economically and otherwise because immigrants are overrunning the border. They're taking your jobs. They're buying your houses. They're killing your pets. And right, we are engaged in a trade war with China and other countries, and I'm going to use tariffs, right? He actually had a narrative, right? I don't buy it, and he's obviously surrounded himself with billionaires who are going to be the next oligarchs. But he had a narrative, and I'm not quite sure Harris had a story. And even a story about what Biden had accomplished, what she was a part of building, because, the truth is the administration did start to turn the tide on neoliberalism.
They did. And can I jump in just for one quick thing? Because I know you got other great speakers and I don't want to take it, but that's such an important point to make. And I'll say this as somebody who's interviewed Kamala Harris a number of times. She has the ability to have delivered a narrative, and it could have been a very, very powerful narrative.
Right.
Instead, too often, I think that she was narrowed into, this strategy, this very narrow strategy of how they wanted to do it, and in fact, she should have done dramatically more compare and contrast with Donald Trump.
Yes,
she did grow up.
That's right.
In an immigrant family, a working family. And I think if she had spoken with pride and strength about that, and she did it sometimes, I'm not going to I recognize there are points where she did, but if she had done that much more aggressively and called Trump out on things that he said, there's no question she won the debate, right, with Donald Trump. That was clear. Why not keep debating him from the stage, right, from at her campaign events? Why not speak on a regular basis about things that Trump had said or done, rather than just stick to this, kind of narrowly defined campaign? I think there were so many places where it could have been done better. And I know that there's people who want to blame Harris, right? Or want to blame Walz or want to blame somebody like that. I think the blame's got to be with the Democratic Party. When you are given the nomination of a party, right? And that is another issue to be discussed. But when you're given the nomination of a party with 107 days to go, that party better have its act together, right? And the fact of the matter is, I think there's an awful lot of evidence that the Democratic Party didn't even begin to know how to do many of the things that needed to be done. And I think it's proved to be very damaging. And again, when you do your kind of forensic audit of all this, that's the kind of thing to look at. That's the kind of thing to think about is, why don't you have a Democratic Party that is prepared for those openings, for those moments that arrive? And I think that your other speakers will do very, very well in answering that question.
John, always an honor to have you on. Glad you were with us right before the election to help us make sense of what we were seeing. And we're glad you're here after the election to also help us interpret this moment. I totally agree that the fault does lie with the Democratic Party, the establishment, and the elites. And I do agree that they didn't have something new to tell the American people. And that narrative, uh, lack of narrative, is a little shocking. Um, so, with that, again, everyone, the one and only John Nichols, columnist with The Nation. If you don't subscribe to The Nation, I encourage all of you to do so and check out John's writing. So, with that, I want to move to our next speaker. And for those of you who are active in our revolution, you know him well. It's Larry Cohen. Larry is the chair of our revolution. He's been a longtime member of the Democratic National Committee, and he was the chair of the Unity Reform Commission in 2016 when progressives first started to sound the alarm bells about what was wrong with the Democratic machine. Larry, welcome to our
Hey,
post-election call, brother.
yeah, great to see you and great to be with the amazing Our Revolution staff team. I just want to take 10 seconds to say, maybe 20, that I couldn't be prouder of the staff work, of the volunteers. I did do a bunch of sessions of joining the text team, and I was so encouraged to see, what we were doing and those millions of contacts that you talked about at the front end. With progressive voters, with our base. And as you reported, also seeing that even at the end, about 10% responded, texted us to say, I'm not voting. And then that's what we picked up. And, the volunteer work that I did was to text back to some of them. And we had a lot of other people doing that as well. But I just want to underscore that in my union, CWA, I always said it's hard, but not hopeless. And take our inspiration from people, in harder moments. And there are many of them in history, obviously, in our country and around the world. And this is no time to get up. It's a time to stand up and fight back and figure out, as John Nichols and you just dialogued, what did we learn and where are we going? And great to be with you.
So, Larry, tell us a little bit about the Unity Reform Commission, the work that you and others spearheaded starting in 2016, and then tell us where we need to go next in terms of transforming the party. It seems like this is a strategic pivot. It's a moment like no others, and there's a moment for us to have an outsized role in helping shape where the party goes.
Sure. And so for me, and probably almost everybody on this call, we do this work because of the people we love and what we want to see in our communities and in our nation. It's not, I didn't do that work. It was a lot of work, all volunteer work on the Unity Reform Commission for the sake of it. I did it because we work inside and outside both the Democratic Party. We work on the issues we care about for the people we love. And as we saw again in this election, you can't ignore it because otherwise we can't win on the issues that we care about for the people that we love. So that's the frame that we were in. So, I was involved from the beginning, had known Bernie for 20 years, was very involved in the 2015-16 campaign. And we had enough delegates elected, even though we were outside and we came inside to contest the nomination. We had enough delegates to negotiate, as you called it, and as it became called, named the Unity Reform Commission. And the convention itself named me as the co-chair. The chair is actually Jen Dillon, named by Clinton because they had more delegates than we did, right? She was the chair. I was the co-chair. We had 7 other people on there, including Jane Klebb, who we're going to hear from in a few minutes, who, as a result of that Sanders campaign and the insurgency, became the chair, knocked off the incumbent in the Nebraska party became the chair. So, one of the things that I would really stress here is that you start with the people we love and the issues we need to change. We work inside and outside, everywhere, rural, urban, everywhere. And it's two things then. It's party reform and it's party building. And I'll just briefly talk about both. So party reform at that moment was particularly getting the 800 superdelegates out of the nominating process. And a year and a half after that election, we got that done. And to go back, and you can't go back really, but, Bernie probably would have won the nomination without those 800. But, I don't want to spend all our time going back. But Clinton had 800 before the Iowa first caucus. The first event was the Iowa caucus. And, she didn't have me, obviously, but, you could have counted on one hand who we had. All the insiders were Clinton in the same way that we saw this year. So anyway, so where are we now on party reform? So I would really highlight one thing, given the shortness of this call. Get the dirty, dark money out of the nominating process. And how do you do that? Well, we don't have one party. We all use that term. There's 57 parties. Every state in the territories has a party, and they have a structure. And as I mentioned, Jane and our rebels from the Sanders campaign fought their way into the leadership, and she's held it now since 2016. There is a path to do that. If you can do that in Nebraska, you can do that virtually everywhere. And she's done it, and she's held it. So, and again, it's inside and outside. But start with that. The number one party reform that I would argue about right now is the dirty money. Now, obviously, we want to get it out of the general election. The problem is we have close to a fascist Supreme Court and federal judiciary. We don't have time to dissect how did that happen. Most of you know. So we're stuck with Citizens United, with the Supreme Court and the way our Constitution. But that does not apply one bit to the nominating process in the states. That is controlled. The Democratic nominating process is totally controlled by the Democratic Party in those states. And they can do all kinds of things, including getting candidates to sign a pledge. I repudiate all dark money. They don't have to call it dirty in our campaign. So one example, we went all the way with Sushila Jayapal, Portland, Oregon. She was way ahead. And a combination of billionaires through crypto, through AIPAC, put $10 million in and beat her with a candidate who doesn't even live in the district by demonizing her day in, day out, and the work she had done as a county commissioner. All lies. So we only have time for one example on that. But so party reform and then party building. There is no party in the majority of the 3,000 counties. There is no party, meaning there's no county committee. There's no county chair. There's no structure. There's no organizing. There's no precinct captains. There is nothing in the majority of the 3,000 counties. And so, as you said, we're now at a point where there's going to be a new chair elected, as it was in 2016. We have partly been down this road. And we're looking for a candidate, and there should be candidates who are organizers. They may not have the charisma, and they won't, of Bernie Sanders, but they're organizers. And we need an organizer. And we need to say that the Democratic Party is going to use its money. It's at least $100 million a year for organizing, not for TV, not for consultants, not for operatives, not for PR, not for media, but number one, for organizing. And how do you do that? You do that in four quick ways. Number one, structure. We have no structure of organization. Imagine my union, and we're bargaining at AT&T, and we have gaping holes where there's no shop stewards. That's a death march for a union. It's also a death march. And in our union, believe me, we had 50,000 stewards, and there were no holes, virtually no holes. This party is half the country is holes. There's nothing there. One is structure, the party structure. Two, party registration. We can see in every county how many are registered in the Democratic Party. Is it going up or down? And only give parties money, state parties, the backbone, that's all we have, 57 state parties. They get their money if they increase the registration in all their counties. But you count it, you meter it. Number three, and this is why we say inside outside, in most of these counties, we have to have a coalition with unaffiliated voters. We don't need to build coalitions with Republicans, even if they're against Trump. We do need to build coalitions, particularly in the half the counties that have nothing, with unaffiliated voters. They're the main group in most of these counties, and in some states, they're the biggest group. So that's number three. And we need to measure, again, the new DNC leader organizing model. We need to measure that kind of coalition building. Progressive Democrats and unaffiliateds together. And number four, we need to measure the turnout. For all the analysis, which I totally agree with Nichols. But the biggest single thing was Trump maintained his turnout from 2020 and ours dropped. And that's literally statistically why he won. But it's also why we didn't even carry the House of Representatives, which we could have been able to carry with or without Harris. That's not her fault. That's about these other things that I just talked about. So those four things on party building and then party reform, led by get the dark, dirty money from crypto and the billionaires in through APAC fossil fuels, get it out.
Larry, I think our audience is reacting very positively. I think we heard you loud and clear. And let me ask you this: what can the people who are on this call, who are leaders and activists within their communities, can they do to help shape the future of the Democratic Party in this moment?
Yeah, the key is in the state parties and then in the counties. And, there are progressives in virtually every one of those 57. It's 57 because of territories, D.C. and Democrats abroad. So, but stay on the states. We have a network. We have members in every one of them. And we need to swing back into action to change that party. And also for those of us who see ourselves more as, quote, unaffiliated or independent, they need to be part of this too. And there's many counties where we should be running unaffiliated. But we need to make a deal on what that is. It's not a blank check. We're going to do it together. In some cases, we'll support an unaffiliated. So we need to get involved in those state parties. The national party should be, we can come back to what it is if we have time. It should be nothing more, as Jane Kleeb will say, than the sum total of the 57 parties. The rest of it is consultants and operatives and on and on. But that's what everybody can do. And that then breaks down to the county. And again, in most of the counties, there's no structure. Put your hand up, get 10 friends, and you'll be the county committee.
Again, Larry Cohen on talking about how we continue to reform and build the Democratic Party. With that, I want to bring up Jane Kleeb. Jane has served on our board from the very beginning. She's the chair of the Nebraska Democratic Party. And a longtime leader in the movement to make sure that resources get spent in state and local organizing. So Jane, welcome. Tell us a little bit about your postmortem on this moment.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joseph, and to Larry and to John for joining me and everybody else that's on the call tonight. First, it's good that we have these spaces. I'm not one of those people that are like, let's put the election aside and just move forward. I do think it's really important for us to reflect, to debrief. We're already doing that as state chairs and vice chairs. We're talking about the concerns that we had with the data model that big consultants came up with, and that was leaving Democrats on the table. And, we were part of the battleground state strategy. We had that one electoral vote in the Nebraska 2nd Congressional District because we split our electoral votes, and we were the only battleground target to win. And I think that there should be some analysis on why and how did that happen. One of the things that we did as a party is I looked at the Harris campaign and said, wait a second, you're not talking to every single Democrat who has a vote by mail ballot, and you're not chasing that vote by mail ballot. And the answer was no, we're only doing the modeled voters, which included Cheney Republicans, et cetera, et cetera. And that is a major red flag, right? And so we do have to do some analysis about What was the structure of these campaigns? How integrated was it into the state and county parties? Was it a parachuting in rather than an integrating with? I sometimes use the analogy that imagine if our public schools are failing, right? And the solution is to parachute in a bunch of consultants from outside of the state. They come in for 6 months, fire everybody, and instead of actually creating a new public school system, they just create after school and before school programs. That's basically what's happening in partisan politics. We are not funding fully our state parties. That's red states, that's blue states, that's swing states. Instead, we fund a lot of outside programs, outside PACs, independent expenditures that are not connected and leave zero infrastructure. I was elected chair in 2016 in the major divide of Bernie and Hillary. And I made it very clear, just like that little bird that went onto Bernie's podium during the campaign, I made it very clear that you need both wings to fly. You need the progressive wing, the progressive populist wing, and you need the conservative moderate wing. We are a big tent party, and that frustrates some of us sometimes in the progressive populist wing of our party. But the reality is that is how we are going to win elections, that we build coalition together. And I am not going to allow any Democratic strategist or anybody that runs for DNC chair to blame the trans community, to blame women's reproductive rights, to blame immigrants, or to blame anybody else inside our big tent. The reality is we as a party and leaders failed voters. I'm not going to blame the voters. I'm going to blame us. So how do we reform the party? What we can't do is hand the party back over to the Rahm Emanuels or others who basically want to run a DC-centric party, who want to control the state party voter files, who want to basically sell the state party voter files to outside groups and others. They want to be able to limit the voter file access, for example, to progressive candidates. That was a big problem, as we know, in 2016 with the reforms that we then pushed through the Unity and Reform Commission. And so I am on a mission. In 2016, I was a brand new chair coming into the DNC chair election. And we came so close to making sure that Keith Ellison was our DNC chair. But what we didn't do is prepare the DNC members, the chairs and the vice chairs, about all the dirty tricks that will happen. And it happened, right? They promised the world to Iowa, saying you're always going to be first in the nation. So Iowa was with us and they got peeled off. They promised Puerto Rico all these new resources that, they were going to send hundreds of thousands of dollars down to Puerto Rico as their state party. They lied to them, but they got their votes and they were able to elect Tom Perez. Now, Tom Perez, through lots of bruises and fights and wounds that I have and Larry has, we were able to move the ball a little bit forward with Ken Martin, the head of the ASDC association. That's the State Party Association. He's a progressive and a populist, came up through Wellstone. He pushed with us that we needed to go from 2,500, which is what each state party was getting, to now 12,500, and red states are actually getting 15,000. That doesn't happen just because the DNC thinks that they need to invest in state parties. That happens because we are on the inside and we are fighting and we are pushing and we are on the negotiation team for the state parties. So my main message is we are winning across the United States, red states, blue states, purple states on progressive issues. Look at any ballot campaign that is on your ballot, even in the red states like Nebraska. We made sure that folks have now paid family sick leave in Nebraska. We made sure that people can buy medical marijuana. Those were 2 ballot initiatives. The third one was making sure that private dollars or public dollars don't get to be given to private schools. These are populist progressive issues that had a cross-partisan coalition of voters. Medical marijuana passed with 72% of the vote. Public schools, keeping public dollars in public schools, passed with 68% of the vote in Nebraska. We won major down ballot races running working class and communities of color. But what is happening at the top of the ticket? This is a problem that I have to solve as chair in a red state. It's a problem the DNC has to solve. So you have infrastructure in all of these states and territories, But if they're not funded, of course, we are going to lose elections. When I inherited the Democratic Party in Nebraska, there was only 2 full-time staff. We now have 7 full-time staff. I was one of the first 3 state parties to say, staff, you should find a union that reflects your values and create a union. Our staff are unionized. We made sure that a contract with the Harris Walz campaign, that the staff that were on board through our coordinated campaign, through the state party, as it happens in all of our states, I made sure that they were paid through the end of November and they had health insurance through the end of December. You can do that if you have strong leaders at the state party level and elect those same type of leaders at the DNC. And so fill out that reform survey that Our Revolution is doing, because we as board members, we as leaders inside and outside need to figure out who we're going to put up for these DNC positions. It's not only the DNC, but it's the ASDC as well, the State Party Association. We got to elect more progressives and populists so we're in the room when those budgets and messaging and finance decisions get made. We have to say no more does only 8 to 10% of the DNC budget go to the states, only 8 to 10% of the budget. No more does only the Young Democrats of America get $20,000. That's it. That's all they got this year to do voter registration and organizing across the United States. Our budget is backwards. We got to get back to the roots, get back to the states. That's how we will start to win elections again.
You know what's striking, Jane, is right. I mean, the campaign itself had raised $1.5 billion, and it was spent on celebrities and ads, and it sounds like a lot of the consultants made bank, even as we're stuck with Donald Trump. And we're not sure. I think the points that you guys are raising is significant. It's like, so what's left after this campaign? Mm-hmm. Not much. Right? I don't think there's a lot of organization in place, given the level of funding, right? The campaign folds up and we're all kind of left to our own devices. And that is not what a party that wants to build enduring long-term power should be doing. So that's what we're all committed to here at Our Revolution. And I saw a couple of questions I want to raise. So tell us a little bit, Larry or Jane, about the process for electing the DNC chair. Who gets to vote? How are the candidates selected? And ultimately, what goes into this politicking?
Yeah. DNC members gets to vote. So if you're a red state, blue state, or purple state, you at least have 4 DNC members. You have a chair, a vice chair, a DNC committee man, and a DNC committee woman, or a non-binary person. So each state has at least 4 votes. And then, unfortunately, a reform that was pushed back in the day to make the DNC more diverse, with 75 at-large positions, has basically become the consulting class. And so you have those 75 at-large members, which are mostly centered in the coasts or in DC and Virginia. But it's basically 450 DNC members will elect the new DNC chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, et cetera. That is critical. You can absolutely call up your DNC members. If you don't know who they are, you can look on your state party's website and start to look at that contact information, ask them the type of qualifications and qualities they're looking for. Candidates are announcing basically as we speak. The only one who has formally announced so far is Martin O'Malley. There's lots of other folks who are going to be announcing in the next couple of weeks. The Rules and Bylaws Committee on December 12th will finalize the rules and the date of the election. Then the DNC Executive Committee, which I'm a member of, we then vote to ratify those rules and that process on December 13th. We assume that the election will be mid-February. But it's DNC members who gets to vote. But you, as voters in your state, you can put pressure on your DNC members to say, reflect the base in your vote.
Thank you, Jane. And one other thing I would say to all of the folks who are listening, right? We have an opportunity to raise our voices and to be heard through those who represent us on the DNC. And that's part of the reason this survey is important, to get at the points that Larry raised, that Jane raised. We need to make sure our money is invested in organizing, and we need to make sure that donors and big donors and corporations aren't running away with our party's platform, right? And the only way we can make sure that this is in front of people is that we get as many people to fill out this survey, and then we're going to publish the results, send it to all the members of the DNC, and get it out in the media. This is what the base wants to see going forward. So again, I want to thank everyone here for joining us today. Jane, Larry, John Nichols. I appreciate you all taking the time to helping our community debrief the election and helping us think about what it is we need to do go forward, right? When we fall down, we do have to get up and keep fighting, because at the end of the day, our country is on the line. We see the craziness that's coming out of Donald Trump's transition operation, his nominees. We have a moment to organize, and we have to start by organizing within our own house. That is the principle that our revolution is moving forward with. So again, I encourage you, fill out the survey. We're going to be sending it out by email. You can forward it to other progressives, other Democrat activists, or even independents that you know. Get them to fill it out. And then the other thing you can do is join our rapid response team. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming down the pike that we've got to pay attention to and move on. I would say some of the things that we're seeing right now are distraction. I know for a fact that there are transition team, there are Trump operatives in departments of government moving program, right? Even as we're, talking about cabinet members and who's going to be this nominee and that nominee and qualifications, the Trump team is already positioning itself within agencies. So we've got to be ready to push back. And that's where you come in. And with that, I also want to urge everyone, if you haven't yet, contribute, become a member of our revolution. We have to keep the organization going strong, election after election. What Bernie started wasn't just about Bernie Sanders and his campaigns. It was really about a movement to transform this country. And I think if Bernie was here, he probably would say, "I told you so" to America. And that's kind of our message. But the thing is, "I told you so" isn't good enough. We actually have to do the work day in, day out, to transform the party and transform our politics. With that, I want to end our call a little bit early, and I want to encourage everyone who's on to unmute your phones. We end with a chat, which should give us hope, because it is fundamentally true. And I'm going to say it: when we organize,
We win.
when we organize,
We win.
and we organize,
We win.
Thank you, brothers and sisters, and we'll meet again soon.
Solidarity.
Thank you,
Solidarity.
Joseph.
Solidarity.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Larry. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Record.